morning, everyone. Thank you to each and every one of you for being with us today. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to a very interesting CXO Roundtable session on the rise of logical data architecture, a very interesting topic indeed. Now, before we get started, I'd like to express my sincere appreciation to our distinguished speakers and attendees for taking time out of their busy schedules. We are fortunate to have the support of our partner, Denodo, and on behalf of the entire work team, I thank you. Now, to kickstart the day, I'd like to introduce our honorable chairperson to open the conference, Dr. Alexey Sidorov. Dr. Alexey was born with the passion for data, programmed in his DNA. Dr. Alexey started his career 27 years ago, building volumetric model of radioactive pollution of Chernobyl nuclear disaster zone with Russian Academy of Science. And since then, earned his reputation as a strategic advisor in all aspects of data management. Now, prior joining Denodo as chief evangelist, Dr. Alexey built and managed enterprise-wide data integration platforms for industry giants like Nokia and Deutsche Bank. In the past 15 years, Dr. Alexey has been helping many companies across 3 continents to digitally transform their business with the cutting-edge data technologies from Teradata and Informatica. Welcome, Dr. Alexey. Thank you for being with us here today. The floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rohan. Thank you so much for your introduction. And I would like to welcome everyone who is watching us right now. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending from where you are joining this session today. And I hope you will enjoy this 1.5 hours that we are going to spend together. Many thanks for the organizers, for the work management, and these companies are old and good partner. We always provided very successful events together, and I hope the event that we are going to deliver today will be also very interesting and very beneficial for everybody who joins. Today we will have 2 parts of our event. First, I will show you the presentation, and I will speak about the rise of the logical architectures in the modern data landscapes. I'll give you some ideas what are the tectonic shifts that are happening right now in the area of data management. And after that, we will have a panel discussion, and we invited a really excellent panelists for the discussion today. We will be discussing the topic on how to build a successful data-centric organization in the modern world. After that, we will have the Q&A session. Please post your questions in the screen that you can see. We will make sure that there is enough time to cover all your questions after the panel discussion. And with that, I would love to kick off our session, and allow me to share my screen and start the journey. I hope you're going to enjoy that. So, as I said, the topic of today's discussion is the rise of virtual data architectures. And to start the conversation, I would love to take a step back a little bit to the past and speak about the concept of data gravity, the concept that was on the table of the data management professionals for years. The concept itself is very simple. It just says that the big data set starts attracting the smaller data sets and grows bigger, bigger, and bigger. This data gravity concept was really behind all the popular architectures and all the popular data management approaches that we've been using for years. I started building my first data warehouse 20 years ago, and at that time the concept was really falling into the paradigm of data gravity. Get all your data, move them into a single data warehouse, and then you'll be able to manage the data and get all the possible insights of the data. So the concept of data gravity, it was always like a move all your data into a single data warehouse. After some time, we started hearing another concept. The data warehouse doesn't really fit into the many new modern analytical approaches. And we started saying, okay, we need to move all our data into a single data lake. Only if we have all the data in the single physical data lake, then again, we'll be able to manage the data, to process them properly, to get the business insights out of those data. But still, the concept of data gravity was here. Move all your data into a single huge repository. In the recent few years, we started seeing a shift into this paradigm as well. However, the concept of data gravity still stays the same. Move all your data into a single cloud, and then all your data management challenges will go. Needless to say that, speaking from now and looking to the past, we can say that neither of those approaches worked in the real world. The companies ended up having several data warehouses, several data lakes sitting side by side inside of the premise of the organization. And also we can see that some data move into the cloud. And that cloud is also, more often than not, is not a single cloud. We can see the architectures that fall into the concept of multi-cloud hybrid data architectures. This is the modern reality. The data anti-gravity is the term that we need to use today to describe our data management landscapes. And I would like to speak about three data anti-gravity forces that basically prevents us from having all the data into a single physical location. The first anti-gravity force is naturally geography. Our data is distributed geographically. We have the data sitting in the different data centers inside of the company. We have the data sitting on-prem and in the cloud, again, distributed geographically. The data can be in the different cloud data centers under the hood of the single cloud service provider, or the data can be in the different cloud service providers' data centers. In any case, the data is separated geographically, and we don't have an option to move them together physically anymore. The volumes are becoming prohibitive. The second anti-gravity force here is the technology. If 20 years ago, when we started building the data management platforms based on the data warehouse, more or less we have the two types of data. We had a relational data in the relational database management systems, and we had the data sitting inside of the flat files, kind of the comma-separated files. Today, we have to deal with a whole spectrum of different technologies that are built to manage the data. It's not only relational database management systems that are managing structured data. We need to manage semi-structured data. We need to manage the unstructured data. We need to manage the data that are structured, but not relationally structured. We can see a huge variety of NoSQL mechanisms to manage the data, like the document stores, like graph databases, time series databases, key value pairs in memory, you name it. All those technologies, they are built to manage a specific, pretty narrow use cases for data management. However, we cannot move all those data into a single technology. The technology is becoming the anti-gravity force for us. You cannot and you should not move relational data into a data lake, because data lake doesn't build for that. You don't want to move your graph data into the relational database, because graph database is basically built specifically to manage graphs, and data feels like comfortable sitting in that kind of technology. The next anti-gravity force that we can see is the ownership, and this is a very important perspective as well. If you look at the data from the data ownership perspective, we can see that the data not only owned by the different people inside of the single organization, And for example, the financial department owns the financial data, and the marketing department owns the marketing data. However, data can be also owned by the different companies and even the different states, the governments. And you don't need to be a huge enterprise to face this ownership problem. Just imagine a small low-cost airline that flies from Dubai to Beijing and from Dubai to Moscow. In China, there is a government regulation that the personal data of Chinese citizens must be kept inside of Chinese border. The same regulation we can see in Russia. So the question is, where do you store your customer data? The ownership becomes the anti-gravity force that prevents us from storing the data into the single physical location. And because of all these three major anti-gravity forces, we can see the rise of different logical data architectures that are addressing this, the challenge of data that are separated geographically, separated in terms of the technology, separated in terms of the ownership. And I would like to go through all those three different kind of logical architectures that we can see more and more now, and that we have to deal more and more right now. The first architectural approach is a logical data fabric. This addresses the geographical perspective of the data anti-gravity paradigm. Imagine your data sitting in the different geographies, in the different places, in data warehouses, data lakes, graph databases, NoSQL databases. How does that work? We don't want to move those data to yet another physical super repository. Logical data fabric concepts works like other way around. We are looking at the data from the business consumption perspective. Whenever the query for the data comes to the logical data fabric platform, the data is gathered and put into the certain model right on fly in a virtual way without landing them anywhere, without materializing this data set. In real time, the query goes to different geographies, different locations, different data stores, getting the data together, combining them, joining them, aggregating them, and then providing this data set for the consumption in the form of either traditional star schema or Snowflake, or in the form of data domains that are master data, and in the form of raw data for data scientists, in any kind of schema that is really easy for consumption of the end user tools, reporting tools, or analytical tools. We can see this logical data fabric architecture more and more nowadays. What it gives us the zero replication of the source data. First of all, you don't move data to yet another physical repository. And it gives us the ability to get the information that reflects the status, the state of the source systems in very close to the real time, versus the approach when we collected the data to a single data lake, single warehouse, and that process takes a lot of time. We had to deal with D-1 data at best. Applying the logical data fabric approach provides us the ability to work with data in real time. I just put the definition for logical data fabric that's given by the Data Warehousing Institute here. So the data fabric architecture is designed to stitch together historical current data across multiple data silos to produce uniform and unified business view of the data. Again, we are not moving data physically, we are making data available in a virtual way. If you take a deeper look at the architecture of logical data fabric, you can see all those data sources at the bottom of the screen. And the data sources for this architecture is not just the applications. Those are the existing data warehouses, existing data lakes, cloud application, documents, data coming in real time from different sensors or IoT devices. And we have the modern consumption patterns that are far from being simple reporting that we did 25 years ago. We need data still for reporting. However, we need the data for predictive prescriptive analytics. You want to provide all the data to train your artificial intelligence machine learning algorithms. You want to provide the data for the initiatives like a data monetization, data democratization, open data initiatives. You want to share the real-time alerts with the other applications as well. And all that challenges is solved by implementing this logical data fabric abstraction layer in between of all the existing data and your consumers. And that layer not only provides the abstraction from the data types sitting behind, it provides the unified view of all the data, provides end-to-end granular security on your data and universal access to that data, so that the consumers, they shouldn't know even where exactly we store the data physically. They see all the data in a single place, very similar as we watch Netflix movies nowadays, right? You don't copy the data, you don't copy the movie to your laptop. You just go to Netflix, you click the icon, and you can watch the movie on your screen, and you have no idea where does Netflix store the data, what kind of technology they use. Let me move to the data mesh architecture that is also becoming really popular right now in many organizations. And data mesh addresses this data anti-gravity paradigm from the ownership perspective. Again, the definition from Forbes, that data mesh allows data sources to remain distributed and controlled, which is very important, by different organizations, but accessed to a centralized application. The concept of data mesh is kind of similar to the logical data fabric. However, now we are speaking about the same challenge, but from the ownership perspective. Data mesh concept says that the ownership of the data should stay with the organization, the department that produced the data. And that department should share this data with their other organization or other parts of the inside of the organization in the form of the unified kind of data services. So the data ownership stays with the original owner of the data. However, the data exposed in the form of maybe APIs or some other interface to a single layer that again provides us the abstraction, the unification, the end-to-end security, and the universal access to consumers of the data. Last but not the least, we spoke already about the multi-cloud hybrid architectures that we can see a lot nowadays. People can use Amazon to store some files in S3. People can use Google for some analytical experiments, because many people say that, hey, Google Analytics functionality is better. People can use Azure because of historically connected to Microsoft, or because of some other functionality that is better with Microsoft. Those cloud service providers, they are competing all the time, improving their functionality. And also the big companies, they want to avoid a single cloud provider lockdown. They want to be flexible. They want to use different cloud providers. And what we can see is the challenge of multi-cloud, and it's very important for chief information officers to develop an effective strategy to understand and manage the mix of cloud resources upon which the business depends. Very high-level helicopter view on this kind of architecture is that your data is distributed among different cloud providers. However, you will still have some of the data sitting on-prem because of this or that reason. There might be like internal security regulation in the company. There might be the government legislation that prevents you from moving data from on-prem to a given cloud data center. This is the reality that we have to live with. And again, the question, how do we manage these distributed data repositories? We have no option move them again to yet another bigger super data lake or super data warehouse. And we still need to apply all the data management principles, data governance principles, data security principles to all the data. And the solution for that is, again, a multi-cloud architecture built on the logical virtual data management principles. When you don't move the data, however, you connect to the data sources you transform, you process the data without materializing, landing data anywhere, and you provide those data for the consumers that might be inside of your company or outside as well. And again, we are providing the same abstraction layer, same unification layer, security, and universal, truly polyglot access to that data. And this is, by the way, not something that I invented or did not invent, right? This is the journey that described on the screen. And I took that from the Gartner report on the changes, almost like a tectonic shift in the data management paradigms. So in the beginning of the 90s, we had to deal with the fragmented, distributed applications, and we needed the data from all of those for the reporting and analytical purposes. And we started building data warehouses. And for some time, we solved the problem. We were able to provide a unified, abstracted layer of the data, physically moving them to a single centralized enterprise data warehouse. However, now we are moved to the post-data warehouse era. We are dealing with the several data warehouses, several data lakes. We are dealing with some other new data formats and structures that are not fitting well into either of those. And the solution is to build a logical architecture that would provide you a way to connect to those data and combine them in the real time and provide for any kind of analytical or data scientific or other kind of consumption. In the nutshell, just summarizing what I've just said, we should stop collecting the data physically. We should start connecting to data. We need to learn how to manage the data in a modern, distributed world when the anti-gravity forces becoming more and more powerful, and we cannot simply have all the data under the hood of the single physical repository, whether it's data warehouse or data lake or some other technology. So this is my message for today. I hope it was provocative enough to start the conversation now and to discuss how do we really survive in the modern world, providing all these changes in the modern data landscapes. And with that, I would like to finish my presentation part and move slowly to the panel discussion that we are going to have right now. Let me stop sharing. And Rohan, I'm passing this over to you.
Dr. Alexey, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. Before we move to the panel discussion and have our esteemed panelists share their views, there's been a couple of questions by the audience. So if you can just take maybe a couple of minutes to answer these questions. One of the question is regarding the technology anti-gravity force. Do you think the data lakehouse removes this barrier?
No, I don't think the data lakehouse approach completely removes the barrier, because the data can be separated geographically. Okay, you have your lakehouse in one country, another lakehouse sits in another country. Data ownership question as well, if you apply that, you want to move all your data into a single lakehouse. How about the ownership? Do you want to take the ownership of all the data? Are you allowed to take the ownership of all the data? Are you compliant with the government legislation when you are storing all your data into a single lakehouse? From the technology perspective, again, if you have the data sitting in the graph database, do you think it's a good idea to move them into under the hood of Hadoop technology or squeeze it into the relational structure? We are beyond that. Lakehouse is a very interesting step that solves a particular problem when you have the data in relational data warehouse and Hadoop-based data lake. This is the use case that you can solve with the lakehouse. However, all the other challenges cannot be solved with that.
Thank you, Dr. Alexey. We do have quite a few more questions, but right now, in order to stick with the schedule, we'd like to move on to the panel discussion. And I request all the audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to type it in the Q&A section. And once the panel discussion finishes, we'll allocate a few minutes to answer each and every question of yours. So thank you so much for your participation and your interactive involvement. Dr. Alexey, we'll move on to the panel discussion now. If you'd like to introduce your co-panelists.
Sure. Thank you so much, Mr. Rohan. Thank you again to provide me this possibility. We are going to have a great panel discussion coming up, and the topic for that is how to build successful logical data architecture strategy for the enterprise companies. And it gives me the immense pleasure to moderate this panel discussion, and I'm really delighted to introduce you all to our panel speakers. Let me start with Mr. Manoj Mishra, who is the Chief Manager, BI and Data Science at Union Insurance in Dubai. Manoj is a distinguished leader and speaker with hands-on experience in a diverse range of technologies within multiple industry settings, having passion and desire to disrupt the status quo, push boundaries, and deliver innovation. Manoj has been successful in managing software design, development, infrastructure, and support functions. Manoj also has hands-on experience in setting up data strategy, creating multi-layer data architecture, and executes through data engineering, data science, and machine learning methodologies, as well as business analytics and BI programs. So please welcome Mr. Manoj. And I will introduce our second panelist, who is Mr. Sanjeev Madhavi, Group Chief Data Digital Transformation Officer and at Himeji Radmas, joining us from Oman. Mr. Sanjeev is a seasoned IT executive with more than 25 years of global experience in digital transformation, value chain innovation, new business ventures, and operational excellence across multiple industries. He works on strategic long-term initiatives focused on capability building and delivering dynamic and innovative solutions aligned to business goals. He used his global experience in leadership roles surrounding strategy formulation, risk and compliance, process engineering, program management, technology roadmaps, enterprise solution delivery, and business entrepreneurship experience to deliver a positive impact to the bottom line. Mr. Sanjeev is the recognized leader in turning business into the digital enterprise and executing business transformation alongside organizational change management. Mostly welcome, Mr. Sanjeev, and I hope we will have a really productive and interesting panel discussion. Last, but by no means the least, member of our panel discussion today, my dear friend, Robin Tandon, Director of Product Marketing for EMEA and Latin America for Denodo Technologies. Robin has over 20 years industry experience working with enterprise and cloud software organizations. He is responsible for Denodo product marketing activities. Robin is a keen agile practitioner and a certified Scrum product owner. He also holds a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science and Geology from University of Sunderland. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome all the panel speakers. And with that, I would like to start the panel discussion. And my first question would be addressed to Mr. Manoj. And the question is, how to build a successful strategy for a logical data architecture for enterprise companies? Mr. Manoj, what's your opinion on that?
The most important thing is actually to having a successful strategy. I think that is the most important thing. And in order to simplify that, I would actually take 3 C's, like connect, combine, and consume. And as an organization, you should be able to connect to every data which is there in your organization, irrespective of whether it is on cloud and on-prem, it is in part of certain PDF documents, or different databases, Oracle, SQL, MongoDB, it doesn't matter. But as an organization, the first thing is that you should be able to connect with all of these data. And also you need to combine them all to get the business value out of that data. And then the third thing is that consume. Ultimately, after combining all these data into a unified architecture, as a business, you need to utilize that data and convert that into value-driven outcomes, or the profitability, or improving the revenue, or bringing a new product concept, or anything. So these are the three most important things to have that. However, to make it successful strategy at the enterprise level, I think some of the other points that you need to consider is, what is your current data maturity level? Ask yourself where your company falls into the data maturity stage. I mean, I think Gartner provides a widely used maturity model. So that helps you to determine where the organization stands. Depending on where the maturity level is, you can define what the successful strategy should be for bringing in or ingesting the new logical data architecture. And also some of the other points like establishing the data governance, assigning the ownership, outlining your data architecture, and then, and also very important, what your team is all about. I mean, their current competencies, and when you bring a logical data architecture in place, how will they cope up with that change after the induction of the new stack? Training them or bringing few new members into the team, how to cross-train. So all these things you need to actually arrange and manage in order to make it really successful strategy for the logical data architecture.
Thank you so much for this great answer, Mr. Manoj, and I cannot agree more with you, and that's exactly the principles of logical data fabric. It's like a connect, combine, and consume, like a 3 steps. Similarly, what we did before with the ETL, like extract, transform, and load.
Right.
Sorry. Currently, we are moving to the paradigm that we just need to connect to the data, then combine the different data sets virtually and provide it for consumption. Those 3 steps, they're very crucial in building any kind of a logical data architecture. And definitely, as always, as you rightly mentioned, we need like all 3 pieces: the technology, the people, and the processes very well established in the organization to make this happen. May I address the same question to Mr. Sanjeev now? Mr. Sanjeev, what do you think about that? How to build a successful strategy for the logical data architecture for the enterprise companies nowadays?
Thank you, Dr. Alexey. I think it's a pleasure to be on the panel. And again, a warm welcome to all of us who have actually joined on this webinar, and we are trying to all learn things together. Again, a very strong, I would say, morning greetings to all my fellow panelists, Mr. Robin, Mr. Manoj, and Mr. Rohan as well, Mr. Arvind. I think I am trying to take 2 steps back here, and I do that for a very logical reason, if I may say so. While we are all technology leaders, we are business leaders before that. And as business leaders, we are trying to enable the business vision that was entrusted to us by the board of directors or by the management, which was basically trying to get business outcomes. Recently, somebody actually asked me to sum up, the upcoming 2022 in 3 words, and I gave the answer as agility with outcomes. So as we are moving into the hyper agile age of digital transformation, everything has to be very fast. And I'm sure Mr. Bill Gates had rightly coined that phrase long time ago, business at the speed of thought. So as such, data analytics is no different. As human beings, we are able to make decisions on the spur of the moment using our pattern analysis, our insights. But again, as you see, from the information technology world, we are looking at having data data packets converted to information, information turns into insight, and that insight will actually aid a decision, for a person. That decision will again instill some action, which will again result in additional data being brought in. So again, we are getting back into the loop on this entire cycle. So as you can see, the strategy for me is very clearly to articulate business needs right from the vision down to where we're looking at servicing the end product consumers, and that could be my customers, internal or external. We are looking at enhancing employee and customer experiences so they can also partake of the data in the most effective manner. Now, in order to facilitate this, we can consider all our wherewithals and resources, be it men, machine, including computing power, if I may say so, in today's world. Our team structures, their capabilities, their competencies, everything is definitely coming to question. Now, the central theme for me on the strategy is to keep it dynamic and to keep it fluid, and that I think very much, I would say, resonates with the 3 C's that we discussed, previously by Mr. Manoj as well as by you, Dr. Alexey. It definitely rings it all together. And it's about keeping it as agile as possible, because we have to get the speed of the decisions faster, and that's where all the 3 C's will combine to actually deliver that. And that for me is I would say, in a very, very simplest form, the aid of what a strategy should be.
That's a great answer. Thank you so much. And it's exactly that's kind of one of those part of that tectonic shift in the business requirements for the data that we can witness right now, that the business is not interested in D-1 data anymore. Nobody interested in what happened yesterday. Everyone wants to know what's going to happen tomorrow. I've heard a really interesting, I give you a very interesting quotation I've heard recently, that's in our time is not a big fish that eats the small one. It's the fast fish that eats the slow one. And that's reality for the business. If your data management platform is able to provide all needed data for the real-time insights, that will enable the organization to compete very strongly on the market and win the competition. If you keep moving your terabytes of data just for the sake of a simple report, that's going to be a report of your sales like before yesterday. That's not something that business is looking for anymore. And this concept of connecting, combining, and consuming the data in real time without the physical replication is becoming really crucial now. Thank you so much for that. I will move to the next question right now, because Mr. Abdulrahman is not joining us, probably some technical issues with that. And the next question I would like to address to Robin. Robin, what do you think? Why a logical data fabric helps businesses be more agile?
So, thank you for the question, Alexey. And as you know, in my introduction, I'm all about agile. So agility in business has been the foundation of success that I've been watching since the early 2000s. Now, how does a logical data fabric allow this or facilitate it? It provides that layer where we're not, if we think about agility in business, a lot of agility is about what you don't know. And then you find it, and then you have to action it, and then you have to do something with it. This is where a logical data fabric comes into play. Using the data virtualization technology that underlies the logical data fabric, you have that ability to connect to disparate data sources. So your data warehouses, whether they be Microsoft Azure, Amazon AWS, Google Cloud, Alibaba, or even on-premise. And that's also, if we go back to Alexey's example of the low-cost airline, that's also really important. We are seeing more and more regulations coming into play. I mean, in India, we've got the new regulations coming later in 2022 around data privacy and compliance, GDPR for a lot of Europe. That's a very important point. And then within the Middle East, we have lots of localized regulations, maybe within the United Arab Emirates, within Saudi and other countries, where the data must remain within the country. So you're an international enterprise. You need to be able to report, to action, to understand across the organization. So you'll never get to that position by trying to shift all your data into one location, because it's just technically not possible. And if you can't do that, you then have to find another way of understanding what's going on. We even see a lot of use of third-party data in to know those implementations. So data from supply chain. We've seen this in the pandemic, where some of our customers that were really successful were able to react to changes within their supply chain because they had that data coming in. And that was accessed through a logical layer, not a physical layer, it was a logical layer. So for me, this is really important for the agility.
Exactly. I have kind of a good metaphor here, if you wish. So that as I actually explained that for the people I meet, so whenever we built a data warehouse or a data lake, what was the process? The business was coming to the IT organization and asking, "Zero IT, give me a glass of water." So what the IT organization did, they said, "Okay, my zero business, you'll get it soon." What we did, we took a huge barrel, put it in the middle of the room. Then during the night, we were filling the barrel with the buckets of the water. Next morning, when the business back to the office, took the glass, and here is your water, your business. This is far from being agile way of managing the data. It's not agile at all. What we need to do, we need to build a pipe right to the business place and give the business the control over the tap. So whenever they want the water, they open the tap and they have the glass of water. This is the agility. This is real-time data management. This is how we should build our data architectures, not collecting huge amount of data into a single location and then delivering some glasses of water out of that barrel. We need to really switch to the more agile, flexible, real-time way of managing the data. Mr. Manoj, may I address the same question to yourself? So I'll just repeat the question. So why a logical data fabric help businesses be more agile?
Yeah, I would probably take a step back and try to compare it with how the conventional approach has been, Mr. Alexey. So we have seen physical data models for a long time, and they have been there for a very good reason. We always, relied on creating a data warehouse by pumping, using the ETLs to pump the data from their source systems to the data warehouse, and then do the visualization on top of it. And that has taken time. It has served its purpose well, for a very good reason. On the other hand, if we talk about the logical data model, that provides flexibility because it consumes data directly from its sources. So you don't have to, move data from one place to the other. Now talking about, we all have heard the 5V challenges about the big data: velocity, volume, variety, veracity, and value, right? So if we talk about the volume, the data volume is keep on increasing over a period of time. That's the biggest challenge that the big data has. Now, if you talk about replicating the data by transferring into a central repository, either in data lake or data warehouse, we are actually not going to solve the problem. We are actually going to complicate this problem more. And in order to do that, the delay will become even more evident. On the other hand, the logical data fabric provides you to connect directly to the sources and consume. So you don't have to replicate data from one place to the other. You can just get the data from the sources directly. So that I have observed what kind of agility that provides to getting the business outcome, addressing a specific technical challenge, finding where the data lies in, which data source, or searching any important information. Just take an example. If business decides that, okay, we are using a specific system today, which is legacy, we will replace it with the new system. And you have a beautifully built, architected ETL, data pumps, and pipelines going into a data warehouse. If the data source changes by the business, what kind of a work that is going to get translated into by the ETL developers, again, redo the mappings. So it takes humongous amount of time to just for a simple change that the business decided to change their system as well as the data source with the new system taking over, right? And it's a very legitimate business scenario. Making those changes in an ETL with the physical data models is very time consuming. However, if we talk about the logical data fabric wherein we work in multi-layered, like a physical layer, then there is an application layer, then there is an interface layer. So by modifying those layers, just few tweakings in those views provides you a very quick method of adding a new interface or modifying the existing interface, and you are done. I mean, you have the data readily available to be consumed. So whatever used to take like a month before, if we use logical data fabric, maybe within week, if not days. And I have, personally observed it, doing it.
Right. Right. You mentioned about the growing data volumes, right, as well as the other parameters of the big data. That's a very interesting how you can look at that. So some people say, okay, I have several petabytes of data in my data lake, and my question is always, but why do are you sure you need those petabytes? So this like a blindly following this data gravity principles, like getting all the data into a single place so that it grows bigger, bigger, bigger. You know what happened in the real world when the star is getting more and more mass and getting bigger, 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 and bigger? At some point of time, it turns into the supernova, and then very quickly into a black hole.
Yeah,
so that
it dies.
even light cannot leave the gravity of this star, right? You don't know what's happening in there. You don't know why and for what you store the data. And this is what we can really witness right now. It's like a black holes of data, those huge data lakes that nobody knows what's inside. Nobody knows why it was collected. It's not even data swamp. It's something bigger, really a black hole, because you don't know what's inside. So that's very interesting perspective on this data gravity and the results of that. And by the way, it's scary statistics that some 70+% of data lake projects, they really fail. They don't achieve the business value, which means that only like a 30% successful. Again,
yeah, because they didn't start that with a business perspective, as Sanjeev was mentioning, right? They just started with go on, collect everything what is possible right now at the moment, and we will identify what needs to be done at a later point of time. And
exactly.
Rightly said, they never came out with what they are going to do with that data. So,
Exactly. So, Mr. Sanjeev, what's your take on this? I will repeat the question. So, why a logical data fabric helps businesses be more agile? What's your opinion?
I think. Thank you, Dr. Alexey. And again, I think it was wonderful to hear Manoj's thoughts on the topic. It's very resounding to see that we have a wonderful idea about how from a technology perspective we are addressing it. And again, for the sake of balance, let me take the business view on this. As again, I'm coming from a business perspective. We are all here to facilitate what essentially is a business decision. All of our efforts in terms of drawing data, bringing it to either a byte or a packet of data is there to facilitate what the business leader calls a decision. And as you rightly know, in the world, if we call it agile, it basically is all denoted by the size and speed of movement. So as can imagine, I wouldn't think that the data lake is the right structure in that regard, or maybe it's not. But the point is, in order to survive as well as thrive in today's world, business leaders need to take decisions faster. And they have always, people have been taking decisions for millennia. The point being, business leaders have always relied on data coming in from the technology team's perspective in order to facilitate that. And nevertheless, despite how much information we provide to them, there is always that, I would say, feel of, I would say the factor of gut feel, as we call in business leader parlance, saying, I understand what you're telling me, the data says otherwise, but I'm still going to go with my decision. So again, there's no way that even despite giving them the best of data, that the decision might actually pan out in the favor of what technology recommends. Having said that, the point of having a logical data architecture is now that we have so much abundance on the data, whether it's meta, master, or actual transactional data. We're now looking at how to make sense of it. That is one thing where the volumes go very high. It's very difficult for us as humans to actually make that inference very, very fast. And in order to actually make that seamless, we're trying to create data sets again in some form and shape. And that's where the data fabric is sort of stitching together the different components of data in order to make it, I would say, faster in terms of drawing that from the high volume data to that inferencing decision of yes or no. And I think that is where it facilitates greatly in terms of having a data fabric layer. A logical data fabric layer is where we are looking at not just compiling it all together into one, but sourcing it as when required in order to sort of put the threads together into a cloth. So I completely agree with the approach. Having said that, whether we are trying to stitch it together or not, we still have to be sort of wary of where we are trying to introduce machine-based computing pattern building, and where we need to have some kind of a human intervention in terms of pattern recognition, because as again, humans can be very fast at recognizing certain patterns, and machines can definitely look at pattern recognition across a large volume of data. But nevertheless, I think the two definitely have to work together in tandem in order to achieve the final result, which is to provide the decision back to the business to take, or the recommendation, if I may say so.
Great answer. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Sanjeev. And actually, I would love to start discussing the next topic again with yourself, if you don't mind, because this kind of interconnected and interrelated. That's also my my view on this kind of a business agility perspective, that really we need to provide the business with all possible data, very well cleansed and governed data in the real-time manner, and the business will be only agile if they don't know how do we manage that, where do we store that, who do I need to go to get access to the data. Business has to have a single interface with all needed data readily available, documented, categorized, cleansed, and governed properly. And logical data fabric is probably the only way to currently to realize this kind of architecture, to implement this kind of concept in real life when we speak about data management. However, let's move to the single question. And the question is how logical architectures unify data, improving the accuracy of decision making. Let me address this question again to you, Mr. Sanjeev.
Yeah, I think, Doctor, the whole premise of data is to provide more and more accuracy in the whole decision-making process. And as you can imagine, any decision taken on a gut feel or in terms of having half information or half accurate information for that matter is definitely going to result in something which we know will not pan out in the right manner. Now, having said that, business leaders have always had that idea saying, okay, I took the call, I took the call basis whatever information I had. But having said that, today, technology and leaders like ourselves can actually make the entire landscape available to that person on their screen as a simple screen level dashboard, by means of which they can actually take a more informed decision. And that informed decision again has to be fast and agile, and we want the entire thing to work. So it's pretty much like a marriage. You need to have the husband and wife work together as much as they can in order to make the whole thing work. So as much as business leaders are in the process of taking a decision, we are there to aid the decision, but we are certainly not in a more servitude role than what they would want us to be in. We are equal partners here in a decision. It's taken using our data models, and it's taken with their business feel. So we have to make sure that the two arms definitely sort of complement each other, if I may say so, number one. Secondly, in terms of the architectural idea, as I mentioned earlier, it is all about the agility and flexibility. So while there is no way that we can say one size fits all, we've all tried to converge, we've all tried to diverge. I think eventually now we've come to the realization that we are looking at data patterns which can either have data in a very converging kind of a pattern, or they can be dissonating patterns, or they can be something which is completely disparate. But as long as we are able to anticipate this ahead of time, as well as give the final inference back to the business within their required decision time limits, I think we are really going to be making the right cut. And that, I think that's the bottom line for me, the way I see it, in terms of how logical data architecture is going to really help.
Very valid point. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you. Robin, may I address the same question to you now? And what do you think? How logical architectures unify data, improving the accuracy of decision making?
Yeah, so for me, to back up what Mr. Madhavi has been saying, is it's about democratizing the data, making it available and easily accessible for the people that need it. And that isn't the IT department, that is the business user. So the logical data architectures, particularly when backed up with some of the more modern technologies that we talk about, for example, recommendations, suggested inference, enhanced metadata, and this is all provided through AI and machine learning. This, for me, is that democratization of data. It makes me think of a particular story that I come across, and it's something from my history. So when I finished my university, it was the early 1990s, and I was working for a software company. And in that software company, we had a bank of typists. So their job was to type, and to type letters that the managers, this was a consultancy, so you'd write a report and that would then go to a typist who would type it up and deliver it. That concept does not exist anymore. Yeah, the last time I saw a typist was probably 20 years ago or more. And even my 84-year-old father does his own emails and could write his own letters if he needed to. So today we've democratized that idea of word processing, of typing, the access to the written, printed word. We all take care of it ourselves. And why do we do that? Because technology moved on and made it easy. It's easy to write an email. It's easy to open up a copy of Microsoft Word or your favorite word processor. And it's now becoming easy to access data. And it's now being given the rights to the business to take their own destiny in their own hands, so they don't have to rely on the IT data integration engineers or other folks. So for me, the logical data fabric or logical data architecture allows us to start driving in that direction. I'm going to be really excited to see what it's like when my children graduate from university. I'm really excited by the idea that data will be available and they'll be able to make decisions that we were not.
Exactly. That's a really interesting time we're living in, to be honest with you. And I always saying to people that we are data management professionals, right? We've been managing the data in a certain given a way that was developed in middle of 90s by Mr. Bill Inman or Ralph Kimball, and then Hadoop came to the picture. We did it, but now it's the time to change. Now is the time that really the changes in the data landscapes and the technologies around are so dramatic that it's the time of the quality leap, if you wish, right? We need to apply different principles to the data management to be able to deal with all those data. And there's a good quotation also from Charles Darwin that I like a lot, that it's not the strongest or the smartest species that survive, actually. That's the ones who adapt to the changes quickly. We can agree or not with the theory of evolution of Mr. Darwin, right? However, from my own experience, these principles work really well in the business environment. Back in 2000, I moved to Finland and I joined a great company, Nokia Corporation. It was really great company at the time. There was no question what kind of phone you have. There was question which Nokia you have. It was like Apple or Google nowadays. So what happened in just 10 years? the company had the smartest people, they have a lot of money, but they didn't adapt to the change. They missed this change, they missed this move to the smartphones, like a perspective. They missed this customer need for the different technology. And the company is gone. Such a giant company, strong, smart company is simply gone. All right, so Mr. Manoj, if you can give your perspective on this. So how logical architectures unify data, improving the accuracy of decision making? What's your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, I think in any organization, the accuracy of the decision making really depends on whether the decisions are being, dependent on the gut feeling or the intuition, or they are really data driven. So every organization has a lot of data, and in most of the time, they have a sense of where the data lies in, and in some sense, they even don't know, because there is no data directly. Nobody is having a data directive which explains which data is there within the organization, which data is outside of the organization, where they lies. So every organization has a lot of data. That's the point. But they are spread across many places. Some of the data has been probably stored in PDF files, as I mentioned before. Excel sheets are still, they are still outdated, but people are still using it. They are keeping data out there. And in some databases, in Oracle, SQL, MongoDB, Cassandra, whatnot, and various other data sources, which are also on cloud. New evolution of cloud, people have probably created a data warehouse or a data service on Azure. So that also has some data. So having data which is so diverse in nature and spread across everywhere, it is very important to get the business, before that they make a decision, all the data that they need. And because the accuracy of that depends on maybe some data which is lying in PDF file. And if it's not that they cannot get access to it, but they have to wait for, they have to dependent on some person to provide that data to them, and then they can make an informed decision if they have to make a real accurate decision. So if the data is not there, as we know, it's business. So business is free to make decisions. They will make decisions basis of the data, whatever is available. So maybe the accuracy level changes. So, but however, if we are using virtualization or the logical data architecture, that provides a quick methodology, quick method to integrate them all and provide, as you were saying, Alexey, that provide the tap to the business. So whenever they want water, they can get the real RO filtered, good quality water directly from the sources. No dependency on someone else to provide this data. So I think it is very important and evident in order to make the right decision, the business needs access on all data that they have. And maybe some data may be on some website. Somebody need to probably get some information from an external website. So I don't have any other methodology that is known to us yet that can make data available in such an easy and manageable manner while using a logical data architecture. So that's what is my thought process around the logical data architecture and the decision-making process.
Exactly. Thank you so much. Thank you for answering. And we don't really have much time left. However, let's start with the last question that we have for the panel discussion today. And I would love to address this question to Mr. Sanjeev again. And the question is, who in the organization is or should be responsible for owning the data integration strategy? In other words, who should decide whether we go data lake, data warehouse, or we go virtual approach, or we go some other way? Who is the decision maker in this case? What's your opinion on that?
Alexey, I think it's always a question which has its own dilemma, whether to own or whether not to own. Again, ownership of data or ownership of the technology vehicle. That is the key question that we're trying to address here. By all means, the entire resource, if I may call it so, but which includes men, machines, and computing power involved in delivering that data to the end consumer, be it a citizen, be it a business leader, or a frontline staff, or a customer. I think we are very much always comfortable looking at the technology vehicle, but we're not as comfortable at the ownership of data to say, no, I own that data, whatever is sitting on a desk, I actually have taken complete responsibility and accountability for that. And that again stems from a very simple reason. That data wasn't entered by me, it was entered by you as a business. I've only been carrying it and I've been trying to massage it around to bring it back to you in a more structured format or in a more concise format. So you can now take the next step basis that. So having said that, I think that the whole architectural element is drawn purely by expertise. And that's where I think as technology leaders, we definitely have to take, the lead in terms of owning that very vehicle. But having said that, I'm still very wary of trying to say that I actually own the data that goes inside the vehicle as well, all said and done, because again, we can try to make as many amends as we can. We can try to correct errors. We can try to remove any of the unwarranted or whatever archival data that we should remove while we're trying to infer a data analytical pattern. But nevertheless, that ownership is something which should reside back with the business. But the technology, the entire architecture, as well as the whole integration strategy is a complete technology domain. We have a lot of anticipatory ideas as well as future and forward-looking, I would say, strategies that we are trying to marry together in order to make sure that our organizations remain agile, they remain scalable, flexible, and versatile. Because that's where we are trying to keep them as fast moving as they can be in today's digital world. So I definitely second the idea that the technology team should actually take the ownership over and beyond what is now, I would say, just the data or the technology. We should own technology and of course part of data, definitely.
Right. Thank you so much for this answer. That's also really exhaustive. I mean, what is my take on that? Definitely the strategy should be owned by the people like a chief data management officer or chief data officer, chief information officer. However, if we speak about the ownership of the data itself, that's a very interesting topic. And there is a really popular concept of data mesh that I spoke during the presentation now. That's getting a lot of traction currently. And the whole idea is that the ownership should stay with the department in the organization that produce the data. Because, for example, financial department, they produce a lot of financial data, and IT, the people from IT, they don't know what kind of the quality metric should be applied. What is the good data? What's the clean data? What's the dirty data? So, and in this paradigm, the data management team is also becoming kind of distributed horizontally. So we need to put a member of data management team into a single department and make him or her responsible for exposing the data that are cleaned, that are structured in a proper way, exposed in the form of kind of data microservices, if you wish. And then the single kind of virtualization platform would be providing the access to all those like data microservices interfaces to everybody else in the organization without taking the ownership, by the way. Well, IT people, they love this idea because they can, delegate a lot of headache towards the business, and this architecture is really getting a lot of traction right now. However, this is something that really works, and that's a kind of a working idea that the business should still own the data they produce. If marketing department produce some customer data, they know the data, they know how they should look like, what's the good data for them, and then they just share that as a product inside of the organization with the other functions, and they can exchange and interchange and build the business insights based on this kind of data microservices interfaces. So very good very good discussion. Gentlemen, we're out of time. I'm really want to say huge thank you. That was my real pleasure to speak to you during today's discussion. I'm sure that's not last time we're having this kind of conversation. We'll keep working together in the future. Thank you so much, Mr. Sanjeev. Thank you so much, Mr. Manoj. Robin, thank you so much as well. That was a great conversation. We have a lot of questions, by the way, and we have to reserve some at least 5-7 minutes to cover them. So with that, I'm moving to the Q&A, and we are closing our panel discussion session for today. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I hope the audience also enjoyed the conversation and got some interesting insights out of what was said and what was discussed. Thank you so much. So moving to...
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Moving to the questions, I'll just try to read them one by one. Does the Node data fabric support direct access of data through open data formats such as Apache Parquet or RC in addition to SQL? We do support more than like 200 different data sources out of the box. And even if something is not supported directly, we can always build the customized connector for that. We build the connectors to very strange things that you really rarely see on the market, because our customers can, the customer's landscape can be interesting. It's like influenced by the legacy, some, whatever happened like 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. We can connect virtually to any single data repository. That would be my answer for this question, actually. The questions are more or less like related to the node. I will be covering them myself. If there is interesting question that I can delegate to the panelists, I will also do that. This next question: what are the prerequisites to start building logical data architecture before applying connect, combine, consume approach? Manoj, maybe you can take this question. What are the prerequisites to start building logical data architecture? What's your vision on that?
So prerequisite is, it's like pretty simple. You need to know what your data sources are, right? As long as you understand your data sources, you know what technology those data sources are, whether they are on a website, whether they are on a PDF file. You identify the sources first, so that you can create a physical. So it's a multi-layered architecture, as I told. So the physical layer talks about connecting all the sources and establishing the mapping. That's all, right? And your physical layer is done. Now coming to your application layer. So you need to you need to see which application is going to use these data. So depending on that, on the application layer, you can create those number of views specific. So like there is application related to CRM function, right? So you need to identify those sources, convert those into the application layer for the CRM. So maybe one view will have a master view for all the requirement that you have for your CRM department, right? Now, coming to the next, maybe you have a sales. So you have to create a sales view that has all the needs, and it's just like creating a view. If you have known how the view in Oracle SQL and different data technologies or DBMS has worked, it works similar. So creating that view from connecting different sources provides you that application view. So you don't have to understand that application much as a business user. You just get all the data by querying that view. And depending on, you can take only 5 columns, you can take everything. It's your pick and choose. After that, the next layer is like your interface layer. So interface layer is something that we have an interface layer. It's not a prerequisite, but it is recommended that you have it, because as I was mentioning, right, if you or business decides to change the application, then you don't have to change or modify in your application layer again, right? Just modify the your interface with a new application layer, application view that you have created for the new, introduced system, and your work is done. Your data, instead of the old system, your new data will be pumped up into your logical data fabric. So I would say prerequisite, if you are asking, yes, you need to understand how the logical data architecture works, how that fabric works, so that you can make the best use out of it. Secondly, probably the team that is going to use or work on it, probably they need to change their competencies by knowing exactly the technology behind it, so that they can do the things that are needed. People are using, I mean, depending on the approach, people are also using, and depending on different vendors, it's up to you. For prerequisite perspective, as a user, as a layman, you just need to understand how it works, the architecture, and probably you need to understand at a high level where your data sources rely. Because if you don't know as a business, like, okay, some data is coming from maybe a third-party administrator, which is not lying anywhere in the then those things are something that business have to identify and fix. That, okay, how we can get hold of a third-party data sources, and that is also possible as long as they allow you to ingest that. You can even extend the virtual layer or the logical layer to get that data into your system as well. So,
yeah, thank you so much, Manoj. That was a great answer, actually. And I would like to kind of continue maybe this conversation with another question that you have, by the way, very many questions. I'm sorry we won't be able to reply all of them live, but I promise we will get back to you and with our answers later on. However, the question is, with data fabric technology, do you think we don't need to move data from on-prem to cloud data warehouse? What I think of that, moving to the cloud is kind of inevitable. Why? Because that's a win-win situation. That's a win for the software vendors, and that's a win situation for the customers as well. The customer is able, first of all, to plan the operational expenses very properly. They don't need to invest into the hardware, into the perpetual license and stuff like that. They can delegate a huge portion of IT management framework, like a capacity management, availability management, all related to those parts of IT management job, right? They can just delegate it to the cloud service provider, and they don't need to even think of that. They can leverage this flexible capacity, elasticity of the cloud when you just pay for what you use, right? You don't need to buy upfront additional hardware, additional CPUs, or additional whatever, just to be on the safe side and be sure that tomorrow your hardware is still able to process the data. So those are the drivers that are moving, pushing the customers towards the cloud, and saving the money is one of those as well. So we are moving to the cloud not because we are not happy with the on-prem data warehouse, but because the cloud data warehouse is cheaper, is more flexible, it's more robust, we don't need to support it. That's the drivers for that. And those drivers, they will stay independently whether you have the virtual data fabric or logical data layer or not. However, what I should say that those customers of Zenodo that implemented a logical data fabric inside of the organization, whenever they started the cloud journey, for them that was very easy and very fast project, because the end consumers, they are not connected directly to the data warehouse or data lake. They're connected to this decoupling abstraction layer that stays the same for the consumers. The consumers don't even notice that the original data source moved from on-prem to the cloud. You can do it piece by piece. You can do like a staged migration, moving some portions, some areas of data warehouse one by one into the cloud, just switching the connectivity inside of the data virtualization platform, pointing to another physical location. And for the consumer, for the BI tools, for the analytical tools, you still connected to same place. We are providing this so-called abstraction layer. We are abstracting from the technologies, from the geographies, from the ownership again. So we are providing kind of a soft coupling architecture in this case. So we provide this like a layer that will stay the same for the consumers, and the data sources can move anywhere else. So my answer that if you have data virtualization, it will make your cloud migration easier and faster. But that's not a substitution of cloud journey, because that's different drivers for that. Okay, I think we don't even have time for more questions. Okay, I'll take the quick one. BI and data analysts, what role do they play in building an enterprise data strategy? I think they are playing a role of providing the requirements for the data team, right? Because at the end of the day, they're consumers. They can share their vision, what they need, how fast they need that, how good data they want to see inside of data management platform. And then the data management, chief data management officer maybe should take those requirements into the consideration when building enterprise-wide data management platform, a virtual platform. That's their role in the organization. And with that, I think we're really short of time. I'm sorry, a lot of interesting questions. I'd be more than happy to answer them, but we have only 3 minutes left. And with that, I would like, once again, I would like to thank you, all the panelists. Thank you so much, Mr. Sanjeev. Thank you so much, Mr. Manoj. Thank you so much, Robin. Thank you so much, everybody who watched us today, who posted the question. I promise we will cover them all. And thank you so much for the Verve Management, our partner that made this happen, this great event. I hope you enjoyed it. And I'm passing this back to Mr. Rohan now. Mr. Rohan, over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alexey, for your kind words. And I'd like to thank each one of our esteemed speakers and panelists. Thank you, Mr. Sanjeev. Good to see you again. And it's always great to have your thoughts shared on such digital boardrooms. So thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. Mr. Manoj, the audience loved you. You know, as we can see, so many questions. Thank you so much for taking time out and for sharing your expertise and experience. Mr. Robin and Dr. Alexey, thank you so much for making this digital boardroom happen. You know, we are certainly truly thankful to Denodo for bringing this session to life. And we'd like to, of course, thank all of our attendees. It's been an excellent session because, you know, looking at the questions raised by the audience, you know, it has been an extremely interactive session. So we'd like to thank everybody as an organizer for taking time out and for making this session happen. Such sessions are extremely important for like-minded individuals to come together and discuss such opportunities and, you know, and learn from each other. And we are very happy to be at the helm of it. So thank you so much, everyone. One request to all the audience: if you have any further questions, please do feel free to write us an email, and we can then connect you with the panelists, with the speakers, and please connect with your point of contact at Verve Management. And all the session recordings, all the presentations will be shared with you in 2 weeks from now, subject to approval from the speakers. So we'll certainly write you an email with the post-event report and the session recordings. Well, it's been a great, you know, almost one and a half hour session. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and thank you so much, everyone, once again. And until the next time, we wish you good luck, safe health, and you know, a great 2022 ahead.
Sure.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you again.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.